Both women were ready to hear his solution to their problem. Terry laid out his proposal. A combination of what he had already figured out on his own, with a few of the holes in the plan filled in by Jeff and Rob at their latest meeting. He was a little hesitant explaining the plan to the mothers as he was waiting for an explosion of anger and frustration. After all, he was the only remaining adult in the lab. This meant, rightfully, that he could end up taking the blame for the accident which he was only partially responsible for. The discussion continued equitably, without rancor or animosity. Both mothers knew Terry couldn't be blamed for this freak accident that really was a 1 in a million chance. They also knew that Terry was the only person who could find a solution. Unless they wanted to wait a long time for new scientists to come in, learn the technology, the nuances of the equipment, and safely test new theories on their husbands. There wasn't really a choice other than following Terry's lead. Besides, his plan was solid and based on the foundation of the theories and equations developed by their husbands. Tomorrow morning they would return with their husbands and begin organizing the next round of tests. It would also be a good time to introduce Karen and let Michelle and Margaret get to know her. After all, Terry wanted to make sure they were all right having Karen assist in the lab and with the children. There was also an issue of time and the possibility of mental deterioration also. Over the past week, both women had begun to see slight changes in their babies' personalities. Each day they seemed more immature, more childlike. Both men still had their knowledge and intellect completely intact, however their personalities had taken a greater toll. Every day their mothers noticed how a little more of their men had slipped away. Each day Jeff and Rob seemed to become more relaxed in their new roles. Not they were used to being a small child, but their reactions and emotions seemed to mimic ever more like their physical ages. They were getting more comfortable eating from a high chair, showing little resistance to playing passively in their playpen or even marching around in nothing but a diaper in public. Diapers, that was also becoming a concern. Their toilet training had completely disappeared. Neither child seemed to have any control over their bladder or bowels. Just as concerning was that neither child seemed to notice when accidents were being made. Earlier today Michelle had watched Rob as he had an accident in his diaper which ended up leaking on his pants. For the longest time, Rob hadn't noticed, but when he finally recognized he'd ruined his pants there was no attempt to fix it or call for help. Rob seemed content to sit in a wet diaper and wet pants, just like a little baby. For Margaret, she'd watched Jeff get changed by a teenaged girl and not even put up a fuss. Jeff had laid back and allowed the girl to clean him without trying to get his wife's attention or help. He had acted relaxed and nonchalant when he was naked in front of a stranger. Michelle was also concerned about how quickly he had lost his toilet training. It seemed like it had been a couple of hours after Jeff was put back in diapers that she found him sitting on the couch in a wet diaper, and he hadn't even bothered to get help with his accident. He almost seemed to enjoy it. It worried both mothers that their husbands were slipping mentally into their new roles. It wasn't that they acted their new age. In fact, it made taking care of them much easier. However, it worried the women what would happen when they were reverted back to their adult forms. Would their emotional instability remain? Would they become irritable around 8 p.m.? Would they see an adult woman as a sexual partner or purely as an object of comfort and safety? What concerned them most was if their men would have to be toilet trained all over again. They lost that ability so quickly. Their wives wondered if it would also come back just as quickly. Would they have to keep their husbands in diapers for the next 6 or 12 months while they constantly checked for wetness? The idea of changing an adult-size poopy diaper was almost too much to imagine. When the clock struck 4 p.m., the women went to the office where a temporary crib had been set up. Both children were snoring quietly as they slept side by side. From this view, no one could have deduced they were anything but small babies. Michelle and Margaret woke them up, changed a wet diaper and dressed them in preparation for the drive home. Jeff and Rob were both groggy from their nap. but eager to find out if any progress had been made. However, it was decided they would discuss it tomorrow, as their mothers were running behind schedule. This didn't help their temperament as they both became fidgety and demanding, wanting whatever their attention was fixated on immediately. However, their enthusiasm soon waned as their shortened attention span distracted them by their mother's prattling. Soon the diaper bags were packed and babies were cradled underarms as Terry helped carry their extra gear out to the cars. As they drove away, Terry stood and waved while a heavyweight in his stomach told him there would be long hours of research and planning, especially with two women that expected 100% success. He could feel the pressure to perform and he knew success would come, however the road seemed daunting. By the time Rob arrived home, he had woken from his slumber. He looked over surprised to see his son Ben in the car seat beside him. His son was quietly prattling away, chewing on a toy, just happy to be with his family again. Rob knew from experience his son didn't mind daycare, but had a very strong attachment to Michelle and was excited and needy as soon as saw his mother. As she unbuckled Ben, Rob watched intently as she made baby talk and cooing while paying complete attention to her son. Ben responded in kind, by smiling and giggling excitedly as he held his arms out. Michelle picked him up. Instinctively, Ben wrapped his arms around her neck and buried his face into her breast. Ben looked so serene and confident with his eyes closed, as Michelle carried him away across the threshold into the house. A minute later she walked back outside and moved to the passenger side, opening the door and unbuckling Rob. He was also excited to see Michelle and received her undivided attention. She also prattled baby talk with him, as she picked him up. Nestling his head in the space between her arm and breast, he unconsciously stuck a thumb in his mouth, relaxing in the thought his mother would care and comfort him. His life was soft and easy, without the stress to perform. No one would demand anything from him other than a smile and a hug. A total lack of stress washed over him in a warm glow. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have to worry about the projects at work and continual expectation for success. As Rob was carried into the house, the pressure from her hand resting under his bottom caused him to notice he was damp. However, it didn't matter to him. His lack of toilet training wasn't his problem, at least for another year or two. When his mommy was ready, she would check his diaper, but until then he was content to let it go unchecked. His mind was vacant in an almost meditative state as Michelle carried him inside and lowered into the playpen beside Ben. Rob didn't move from his sitting position as a warm stream of pee ran across his groin, as the warmth absorbed into his diaper. He was happy to be home where he could fall back into the routine and daily schedule. Soon it would be time for dinner and a bottle, then a diaper change and a little more playtime before bed. Rob was looking forward to his evening, especially since he had no responsibilities, not even the planning of his routine. Michelle would take care of everything. His life had simplified. He was perfectly fine to waste the day playing with sunbeams and chewing on whatever was placed in front of him. The passage of time also seemed to go faster nowadays. Rob never noticed how the hours passed quickly. After breakfast, it was playtime till lunch. Unless their stomachs growled, both boys didn't know lunch or dinner was coming soon. Rob only knew it was dinner time because he'd noticed the van's clock read 5:14 p.m. while being lifted from the car seat. He knew that dinner would be soon and he was content to wait a few minutes. Tonight Rob was served dinner first, then placed back in the playpen with a bottle before it was Ben's turn. As Rob was lifted from the high chair, he could feel the diaper pull heavily on his hips. Then he noticed his legs felt a little clammy. Normally he would have chalked it up to the feel of a wet diaper, however the cold reached down the back of his legs. When placed in a sitting position, he thought the diaper might leak as it squished below him. He knew his pants were wet, which was confirmed when he looked back to see Michelle wiping the seat of his high chair before sitting Benjamin. For now Rob was most interested in the apple juice. The floor of the playpen was waterproof, so no damage would be done. He laid on his back and happily nursed from his bottle. Rob's incontinence was about as bad as it could have gotten. Most of the time he seemed to be damp since he dribbled with little control over his bladder. Much like Ben used to do. Fortunately his son was getting better all the time and remained dry between accidents. Rob and Michelle figured their son would be potty trained pretty soon. Rob giggled around the nipple of his baby bottle at the thought that Benjamin would probably have to help him to learn how to use the potty. The days turned into weeks as Terry worked on a solution. His efforts to find a solution were assisted by the young and talented Karen to help out in the lab. Karen was enthusiastic to be hired for such an exciting project. She'd heard rumors of a project focused on discovering new aspects in the relationship between space and time. Her aptitude for the subject was very promising. She added innovative ideas to the discussions with Terry which helped them overcome hurdles. Karen became indispensable with the repairs to the DNAM and other duties around the lab. As the testing phase of the project began, she was in the lab 12 hours a day helping prepare and conduct. As the tests on the lab animals came to an end, she suggested new experiments using a human subject to test small changes in age. She was so confident in the process she wanted to be the test subject and argued at length to be allowed to go in front of the DNAM. Terry, already shy from the accident, was reluctant to conduct trials on more humans at the time. However, Karen kept suggesting a new test which Terry would only agree to consider. For the two babies, the passage of time was non-existent. Each day seemed the same but no less interesting, and they all seemed to blend together. Both would wake up and roll around for a few minutes until their mothers came in, changed dirty diapers, brought them downstairs for breakfast. Before playtime began. Usually, by mid-morning they would receive juice or formula and another diaper change before going down for a nap. Then lunch, more playtime, diaper change, and an afternoon nap. Up again in time for more playtime, supper time. Then it was soon time to get ready for bed.